For all its potential and innovation, composing music typically comes from a set of rules. Rules like key, time, and tempo. There's no shortage of examples in jazz, classical, prog rock, and electronic music of artists who toy with those rules and produce brilliant, challenging works. But many of those artists still work within the 12-note scale. This is Kingston Live, and our guest today challenges the very framework of contemporary music composition, right down to the notes and chords themselves. James Mulvale has been composing music for TV and video games for years. But on his own time, he writes music under the pseudonym FASTFAST, where he experiments in the microtonal realm, picking apart and unlocking new melodies by using the notes between the notes. Since he started experimenting with microtonal music, James has released a series of records and singles, culminating in his forthcoming LP Xenon, which will drop in May alongside a release show at Musiki. There's nothing wrong with your device. We invited today's guest to have a little fun with our theme music. We'll get into more of that a little later. But James, I wanted to start by talking about some of your other work first, because I know you do a lot of other music. You do scoring for various projects as well.
Yeah, it started about, I go back about 11 years when I got my first TV gig, and that was for a jewelry company that I was working for. I worked for Gems TV as a security guard, and I just got talking to the production team one day, and I said, hey, I do music as well as a hobby. I'd studied it at university, and it was like, if you ever need something for a promotion, let me know. And I got a couple of little jingles for various like jewelry lines of jewelry, and a Halloween spectacular, spooktacular, and the Christmas thing. And then that went away for a bunch of years, and I moved to Canada. And when we had our first kid, my wife went back to work after maternity. And instead of working in a kitchen, I decided to look after my kids, to be a stay-at-home dad. And I just got back into composing just to have something to do in the day. And I picked up a couple of cool gigs for American Pickers, which is a show in the US. It was like an auction junkyard show. And I just wrote a whole bunch of music for those shows, and Murder Calls, and a couple of others. And I've done some video games. I'm currently writing for a video game as well. I've done some work for Bell Media. I've done all kinds of things, but it started out as just a way of working from home with the skills I have.
No, that's really cool. And I wanted to start with that because I know a lot of musicians in town, everybody seems to have a day job. And I remember Chris Morris, he was on the podcast once. Actually, he's been on the podcast many times, but he made the comment that everybody seems to have a day job in either construction or hospitality. But you do, yeah. you work at the mansion too, though, I understand.
Yeah, I'm a cook at the mansion as well. That's ready income. And then I get royalties every 3 or 4 months.
Nice. So you went from England, and I know you were in Toronto. How did you find your way to Kingston?
I knew Anita, who runs Roswell Rehearsals, and I've known her for 20 years. She's from my hometown as well.
Which is a crazy coincidence.
It is a crazy coincidence. And I'd lost touch with her for years. And then, I don't know, I posted a Facebook message, a post probably about, 8-9 years ago, once I first moved over, and she just got in contact, said, are you seriously living in Canada now? And I was like, yeah. Are you? So we came to Kingston like about a year later, me and my wife, just to visit. And I was like, I've got buddies here. And then it took another bunch of years to convince everybody to actually move to Kingston. It was like, when we had our second child, we didn't have any rooms left in the house. We needed the kid needed its own bedroom, right? So we had to move somewhere, and Kingston seemed to be a good pick because I'd already got a couple of friends here, like Trevor and Anita from from Roswell. It did take a bit of convincing, but it seemed like we had options. It was either Guelph or Stratford or somewhere completely different. And like Kingston always seemed nice, and it's got a great music scene. Like the first time I came here to visit, it was on my birthday, and we went around to Bon Evans's house, and they made me a cake, and we had a party. It was like complete strangers have thrown me a party. Like, for my birthday. Like, no one ever threw me a party in Toronto, like even friends. So it was like, it just seemed like a good vibe.
So you get to Kingston, and you've elaborated on this a little bit already, but yeah, what were your impressions of the music scene in general?
It seemed really pretty vibrant. The first year we was here, we went to like the Homegrown Festival and McKinnon's, and it was like, wow, there's like, they're just doing this all for themselves. It seemed like a small town, but like there was just music everywhere. Like every night there were like at least 3 or 4 gigs on, whether it's like at the Mansion or the Toucan or Musiki. There's always something. So I mean, I love all kinds of music. On the other hand, there wasn't much electronic music. There was a lot of blues and a lot of rock, and I love all that stuff as well. But it just seemed to be very one-sided, one style, one genre. And I'm sure like there are reasons for that.
Well, and that's maybe a good segue, because that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you. And I think you're right. I think Kingston tends to be very rock centric, like very mainstream rock. And really that's what put us on the map.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. But one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, and we've wanted to talk to you for a little while, is you're doing something that's very different. Not only is it's got a very sort of electronic foundation, but it's this microtonal approach, which I think is just amazing. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials, and Adam Neely is one of my favorite YouTubers, I guess that's the word. He does a whole bunch of lessons and discussions about different types of music and how to produce it. And this one video that he made was called "How to Make Lo-Fi Microtonal Hip Hop," and I was like, "What on earth is that?" And it was a really interesting video. It totally blew my mind. Like, it's opened up all these new ideas that I'd previously just didn't think existed, where you take a regular octave, and you don't have to, like an octave is normally 12 notes, right? And you can have it as many notes as you like. You can have it 2 notes or 5 notes or 12 or 24 or 36 or you can pick any number. You can divide a piano octave into any numbers, and it doesn't always sound bad. you just expect it. When we learned a little bit about microtonal when I was at university, and it was this really stuffy, esoteric, like hard to listen to. It was like there's atonal and then there's microtonal. There's like one step. It's worse than atonal. And that's the impression I got for years, and I didn't even think about it. So if someone said the word microtonal to me, like even 5 years ago, I would have been just like, "Oh, shut up, that's horrible." But yeah, this one video just explained it so beautifully. I was like, "Oh, what if I did this?" And I got a couple of software synths, and that you could actually program it to change the notes and divide it into different numbers. And I started finding that you can still have regular chords on there. You can have major chords and minor chords, and it doesn't always have to be out of tune. And I was like, well, as soon as you find a major chord and a minor chord, you can write a song, right? And then you got all these extra chords to play with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just opens up things in ways that you never thought possible. And that YouTuber you mentioned, I think I remember you posting that video or something like it years ago, and I watched it and I was like, that's amazing and brilliant, because I remember he had the 2 keyboards, and one was, just regular 12 notes, and then the other one was those notes between the notes.
Yeah, it's like 50 cents higher.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this to the listener, because I know some of our listeners will have sort of a musical foundation, but a lot of them are just music fans too. So are you able to sort of demonstrate the sound and the notes between the notes for us?
I've got a little demo made. So this is a regular 12-tone octave, which is everyone should be familiar with this. Right, that's 12, and if you double that, you get 24, which is this.
That's so weird.
I know.
It's so weird because you're not used to it. It's funny because it's the same spectrum of tone, but it's divided differently in a way that we're not used to.
Yeah, and then if you want to go even further, this one is 31.
Oh, I'm scared. It's crazy. Yeah, so you can
make major and minor chords with all of those. It doesn't have to just sound out of tune. You can actually make things that sound really nice and in tune. That's a nice. So that's like one semitone higher and back down. Well, it's not even a semitone; it's half a semitone.
I just find that amazing. And not just the fact that you can divide in the notes, almost infinitely, right? Theoretically, but the fact that, you could take that and make it musical. Like, I think that's the next step. I mean, just getting the concept of, okay, there are notes between the notes, between these ones that we're just accustomed to hearing. But how do you take that and actually compose something with it that's listenable?
Well, I still like 12-tone music. So I write music that I'll find a chord sequence that I like this, I don't know what to say, like C, F, and G, and then just tweak one of them so it sounds a little bit wonky, and then just mess around with them. It's just like how I'd write on a guitar. I've written so much music for various. I've written like over 500 pieces for TV and video games. So like, I'm pretty accustomed to writing like this vanilla music. So you just take that same theory and just apply it. You just find the notes that you would normally like and then tweak a few of them.
Is that part of the impetus for it? Is just because, speaking as someone who also makes commercial music, is it just a need to kind of get away from that and do something very, like, almost subversive, I guess? Is that?
Yes, 100%. I got so bored writing the same stuff over and over, because you know what they want. They'll say, oh, I need a minute of James Bond style music. I need a minute of superhero music. And they don't want you to put your own spin on anything. They want it to sound like John Williams. They want it to sound like Barry. They want it to sound like, but so you basically being paid to rip off other artists. I was in a big depression with it. I was like, what am I doing? And like, it's like library composer is one of the lowest forms of composer, right? If you think about it, like I'm writing for reality TV shows, and nobody listens to the music on those. It's just to fill the gap between them talking.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of worries me sometimes, this idea that there is more music being made now than ever in human history, but so much of it is just going to, it just ends up being background music. It's just kind of there, and, it doesn't really move anyone. It just kind of sets a tone, right? Yeah, it's silly. And it's people want it, though. It's a definite, much needed industry. There's more jobs than ever. Like, it's not hard to get on a library. You just have to sort of just write to a few and offer some samples. And like, the technology nowadays is so good, you can knock out, as long as you can write decent music, you can produce it to like such high quality now than was possible even like 10 years ago. And there's so many influences and videos and TikToks, and everybody needs a soundtrack nowadays. Yeah. Yeah, I think the problem is it becomes a commodity rather than a means of self-expression.
Yes. So going back to that, it was my rebellious streak going, I'm fed up with making all this music that sounds the same. Let's try and do something completely different. And doing something completely different and still having it like sound palatable. Like I don't want to start being like Messiaen or being completely experimental, Bela Bartok or something. Like you want something that's listenable. You could maybe get an audience for, but still give people something that they haven't heard before.
Well, that may be a good moment to drop a track, because I'm sure we've been talking about this enough. I'm sure the listener is keen to hear what we're talking about. So yeah. What are we going to hear here?
This song is called Stars, and it's about the downward spiral of America.
Pitchforks come, where you gonna run? What you gonna do when the pitchforks come, where you gonna run? Thoughts and friends, likes and shares. Thoughts and friends, likes and shares. Gonna meet a tall-eyed stranger, gonna make a
Thank you for listening to Kingston Live. Be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. For more great Kingston music, check out the Kingston Live playlist on Spotify. For show listings, artist info, and all things Kingston music, check out kingstonlive.ca. You can also hear our sister show, Kingston Live On Air, on Amherst Island Radio and CFRC.
Let's talk about writing, and let's talk about how this album, we'll talk more about the album in a moment, but I know that the COVID experience had a bit of an impact on what you've been doing too. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I just discovered this microtonal business just before COVID hit. It was probably like the October before it all happened. And I think it was by March or April, I'd probably got like 1 or 2 songs finished. And I wasn't really serious about it. I was just like, it was an interesting little experiment. But when COVID hit, it was like, well, I've got no work now because a lot of the production companies shut down. There was no more TV being made. They wasn't asking for any tracks. So I was stuck at home with all my gear and just like, well, what am I going to do now? So I was like, oh, let's have another go at this microtonal stuff. And I just went deep into it for probably 6 or 7 months. Just solid in my studio, just working on it. And the first album just came out, I think by May. So between October and May, I'd finished an album, and it took another 2 years to do the second one. But yeah, I went hard on the first one. It was just COVID was, it was good.
That's really interesting to me. And when COVID first hit, we'd been doing the podcast for just over a year. And there was this question of, should we keep this going? Like, there's essentially no live music scene right now, and this is a live music podcast. But we didn't think about it very long. We're like, no, there is tons of talent in this city. And it's been really interesting. We had no idea how long COVID was going to go. But I realized over a while, we've essentially been chronicling the COVID experience as it affects a music scene. And it's been really interesting to see how it affects inspiration and creativity and output, because some people we've talked to, for them, music and expression, it's a reflection of what's happening in life. And when life slows down, so does the expression. But then there are people like yourself and Ricky Brandt. Cacao is a great example. People who they just had this time and then they're just going to, like you say, just go hard and just make music, just keep it going. And
I think Ricky too, I can't speak for him, but it kind of just, it keeps you going. And like when everything seemed like it was, it was like the end of the world. So like, what? And there was no work. The whole world changed, and it felt like I want to make this now, just because it might be the last thing I do. Like it might be it's like paranoia, right? Like we're all gonna die. And it's happening again now. We're all going to get killed in a nuclear war in the next few weeks. Like that's what that's like. This is just a general feeling across the world, right? Everybody's kind of just the next thing to be paranoid about. So we have to make hay, I guess.
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, maybe not the paranoia and thinking we're all going to die in 3 weeks, but
I don't want to be. I don't want to. I'm not sure. I'm not saying I'm going to be remembered for anything, but I don't want to be remembered for that guy who wrote that jingle on American Pickers. I'd rather be like, oh, he got something else like that he did for himself. And it was like, I want to do that while I've got the chance.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think a lot of people have felt that way. I mean, everyone has reacted to this in many different ways. And I don't mean to sort of normalize the experience, but I think for some of us that did have that downtime, it was an opportunity to take a step back and get back to zero and figure out what are my priorities. And it sounds like you had that experience where you said to yourself, okay, I produce all this commercial music and that's fine, but I need to do something for me. I need to explore who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Yeah, I feel it's similar to like how maybe Dr. Seuss was. Like he had 20 years in the advertising industry, just like designing billboards and making tickets and flyers and whatnot. And then one day he's like, I'm going to write a kid's book.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like completely the opposite. It's the least commercial thing possible, but it's his own art.
Yeah, well, and it's like you said earlier, talking about being remembered for something, and I think maybe that's not really what it's about, and I think you were saying that too. I don't think it's about you don't want it to be sort of driven by your own hubris, like I need to have some sort of legacy, but I think there's a need to feel that you did something that meant something to you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And of course, the sort of recent culmination of that is an album. Tell us about this album that's coming out.
This album is called Zen On, which is a pun on Xenon. Zen is another word for microtonal music. It's called Zen harmonic, which I guess means alien sounding. And I kind of prefer the word Zen harmonic than the microtonal. Microtonal conjures up all this esoteric stuffiness that I was trying to avoid in the first place. But you say something Zen harmonic and it's like, oh, what's that? So Zen On, that's been the title for at least a year. And it's a combination of a culmination of tracks that I've written over the last 2 years. A lot of them have already been heard. They're on YouTube, but this has got like new mixes and segues between the songs, and there's a bunch of new songs and sound design. So it's like part compilation, part new.
Okay.
But I think there's 12 songs on it, and it clocks in about 47 minutes.
And I've been enjoying some of the artwork that accompanies some of your tracks, because I feel like it kind of matches. It also has a bit of that dissonance, not so much in a sonic way, but in a visual way. Where's that artwork coming from?
Which artwork in particular? Because the first album cover was designed by Liam Mills, who's a fantastic Kingston artist. Mm-hmm. And I asked him to design me an album cover, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, bro."
Is that one with the colors and stuff?
Yeah, within 24, it was like a nuclear bomb of color.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's called New Color Bomb was the first album.
Yeah.
And he came back within 24 hours and said, "Oh, I've done 2 for you." I was like, "That one, no changes. It's amazing." So like he just got the idea straight away. Like he's such a fantastic artist. But other stuff, I try and I'm not very good at drawing or anything like that. But I like trying to create visual stuff for my videos. Like I've not paid anybody to make a video yet. I can't afford to. But like I like to try and find ways, like really cool, interesting ways of making videos on the cheap. So I've been using my phone a lot and trying to do slow-mo stuff. I've been doing this new AI generated art, which was on the last single, The Journey is the Destination. And that took a long time to put together.
Yeah, I think that's some of the stuff I was thinking of, because I remember seeing some images on Instagram and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of AI. There's a website called Night Cafe, and you can you upload a photograph and then you tell it what you want it to look like, and then the computer kind of draws it for you. It's kind of strange.
Okay. So
you have to give it like text prompts, and then you just modify the words until it looks like what you want. I haven't got I can't paint a stick man. but I like experimenting with the computer art. So
the album's coming out, and I'm assuming there's going to be some performances as well.
Yeah, I'm playing at Musiki on the 2nd of April. I'm playing the Toucan on the 26th of April, and I've got an album launch party at Musiki on the 20th of May. Which is the day it comes out, and it's also my birthday.
Oh, well, that just works out great, doesn't it?
Well, that was the idea, to like release it on my birthday. There's a British artist called Beans on Toast. Every year he releases an album on his birthday. He writes folk punk. He's amazing. He's very political and very funny. he should be like a poet laureate, but he writes an album a year and he puts it out on his birthday, and that's it. And he has a big party, and that's it. I was like, I'm going to do that.
Well, that sounds great. I got to ask, what does a FASTFAST show look like in terms of how you set that up? Like because I'm assuming a lot of this microtonal stuff is going to happen in real time, but I mean, you can't do that on a guitar. I'm assuming there's a way to do it with a couple synthesizers, maybe. How do you put all that together?
There is a way of doing it with a guitar. You have to get extra frets, though.
Yeah.
Or fretless.
Yeah.
Neither of which I've got. And I did buy a fretless bass, but it's really hard to play.
Yeah. Geez, those things scare me.
I can play normal bass quite easily, but fretless is just like it. Yeah, it's really hard.
It takes a special monster to play the fretless bass. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So with I have a keytar, which is like it's a sideways keyboard on a strap, so I hold it like a guitar and play it like a piano. And what happens is I use my music software retunes the songs on the fly, so it knows I'm playing regular chord shapes, triads, or regular chords and regular melodies, and my digital audio workstation, I've programmed the tunings. So when a chord is supposed to be 50 cents sharper, it automatically does it for you. I experimented with a pedal. I like having a pedal to bump me up, and it was like I just couldn't keep track of it. So just having it all automated, the least things to worry about, because I've got to play and sing, play chords and sing at the same time. And like I have enough trouble just doing one thing. I didn't want to have to do three things. Yeah, just I automate all my pitch correction and not pitch correction, pitch modulation. I don't use pitch correction. I try not to. So yeah, so it's all done on the laptop. I have backing tracks with all the other instruments. And I play the piano part, and the computer does all the work for me.
That's crazy.
I tried a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. Now I've got like a solid template, so I can add new songs to it as they come.
So, James, I had a chance to take a cursory listen to the album before we hit record here. And it's really neat because there's a lot of different stuff happening. Like we talk about this microtonal stuff, but that's not a genre, of course. And I can hear a lot of influences in what you're doing. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, I want a car sticker that says microtonal is not a genre.
Yeah.
It really isn't. It's like it's a tuning system is not the style that you can have. There are many bands, like there's Mercury Tree, there's like heavy metal that plays microtonal, and then there's like Harry Partch who did like all this marimba and percussion stuff, and there's every genre possible you can do with different tunings. So my record starts off pretty safe as like a Beach Boysy kind of Beatlesy number, like a 60s psychedelic. But the album delves into drum and bass. There's a lot of synthwave styles. There's some like epic orchestral bits in there, and it all kind of ties together. I've spent a long time trying to make all the things flow. I originally wanted to do it as a side and a B side with the songs at the beginning, and then the instrumentals on the side B, because there's about the same amount. But I asked a few friends, and they were like, "No, just put it all together and let people listen to it, because it's not, don't split it up. It should be like one thing rather than two separate things." So I've tried to stitch all the electronic music in with the singer-songwriter songs as well.
Cool. And you're right. I think there is, despite all the craziness and all the different influences and styles, I think there is a continuity to it.
I think so. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a concept album, but there's definitely a feeling of a journey, and a lot of the songs are about going on a journey or going for a walk or changing yourself or just becoming something new. there's a I think one of the songs on there is about like having an illicit affair over text messages and running away from your situation, and then there's a song about dying in your sleep as well, and going to the next life and all kinds of things. So there's definitely it's all about change, I think.
Well, James, this has been super interesting. I feel like my musical world has been broadened slightly listening to the music and having this conversation. So thank you for that.
Listen to more microtonal music. I can recommend a whole bunch of different people. Listen to Elaine Walker. Listen to Sevish. Stephen Weigel. He does some crazy stuff. The Mercury Tree. There's so many. Zia Arose. There's so many people doing I'm influenced by. Like, this stuff is so underground, you'll never find it unless you look for it. Mm-hmm. But there's some seriously cool music going on.
I'm going to look for some of that. That sounds really cool. James, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Tell us one more time about the album, when it comes out.
The album is called Zen On. It comes out on May 20th. It should be available on Bandcamp, FASTFAST.bandcamp.com. I'm planning a physical release, but I'm not too sure how to do it yet.
Well, keep us posted.
I will.
Thanks a lot, James.
Thank you.
This has been Kingston Live. We encourage you to rate us on your listening platform of choice and subscribe where possible. For show listings, artist info, and all things Kingston music, check out kingstonlive.ca. Kingston Live was produced in Kingston by Titan Sound. Hosted by John Sanfilippo. Voiceovers by Riley Jabor. Writing and research by Peter Sanfilippo. Executive producer Rob Howard. Kingston Live is a member of the Canadian Live Music Association. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@kingstonlive.ca.